Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the RailFreight webinar. Today's topic is the influence of the outbreak of the coronavirus on RailFreight. And with me on the table are Igor Tambaka from Railbridge Cargo and Wibbo Mossing-Holstein from Nunner Logistics. And we have two other guests today. They are in China and they will be calling in later during the webinar. We're going to start with these two gentlemen. I want to make some notes before we start. There is a lot of room for questions, but since we have a Skype call in between, we're going to have the questions separate. So the questions for the speakers who will call in can be asked during the Skype call, and the questions for these two gentlemen we will handle in the end. So thank you very much, all of you, for tuning in, and let's start. The coronavirus. It has been a hot topic in the news. For everybody, actually. It's concerning passengers, the movement of passengers, of course. A lot of people are affected. But there's also a big impact on the logistics industry, not only rail. But we're here to discuss RailFreight in particular. A lot of things have been going on the last few days. And I want to take a look at those dates to understand where we are now. Today it's the 4th of February. And the 2nd of February, we're supposed to see some openings, and that hasn't really happened, I think. Can one of you describe which state we are at?
Yeah, so for what we've seen lately from our customers, but also the local providers, is that, let's say, of the 14th of February, it was announced that the Wuhan train would be operating, and then as of the 15th, we would see trucking companies also participating in trucking from and to Wuhan. But that's preliminary because we live from the news of the government. That's leading for us, and we follow that news every single day.
And when you say opening, do you mean the opening of RailFreight terminals, the opening of RailFreight operations, or
Yes.
the resuming of people going back to work?
I'm talking about the RailFreight operations in the terminal. People going to work, as I said, the 15th is a very important day for us to see if the trucking companies are really participating and are working, actually.
Right. Do you have the same dates? Because there are some people having different dates.
I have contact with the platform WAE, Logistic Trade, and they actually cancelled, that's what they told me, cancelled all the east and westbound schedule till the 1st of March. So that's also the rumors which constantly you do not really get official reaction from government side. So and it's always waiting who want to take the responsibility for the delay, and that's the whole issue at this moment, because it costs also a lot of money, and people people are responsible for that. So.
Yeah. But who do you contact if you want to know the latest?
I contact the leader of the WA Logistic Trade, which has been a good friend of me for a while.
And everybody can contact that person?
No.
Okay. And who do you contact?
It's indeed the local providers and the trucking companies locally to see if it really works. So it's the local contacts we have.
Yeah. So different people having different information, and that's why we're seeing different dates. What is so important about the 10th of February?
The 10th of February is actually everybody has put into quarantine at the end of January. So assuming that you need 14 days to see if you have the virus or not, they can determine the amount of infectious people and also know how to handle it. Only we don't know what the local situation is, how much people are really infected, are the numbers and the figures we see, the real figures. Because I think they don't know by themselves also, because cities and villages also in Hubei get more and more locked up from government side. So actually we do not know what the real status is at this moment. Oh.
Well, this whole outbreak came at a very unfortunate timing because there was the Chinese New Year, as all of us know, I think, by now. and that was supposed to end by the 31st of January, and it has been extended. Has it been extended for everybody till the same date, or are there some differences there as well?
We've seen that Wuhan and the Hebei province is a difference from the rest. So there we guess, and what we've seen in the news, they would be sort of closed until, let's say, the 15th or even longer, in the end of February. But that's still news by the day, so to say. And the rest of the provinces are sort of also a question mark what the government will do, how infectious they are, how many people are infected,
Right.
and which terminals and which city centers.
And what does it mean for you, for your business, when the new year is extended?
It's actually the most worst Chinese New Year that can happen, because we first had Christmas. You had a very busy time before Christmas. Then you have a gap in the European schedule. Then suddenly, actually within 1 week after New Year, the people start already to prepare their Chinese New Year. So actually, we have a very long gap of new. Actually, we were quite surprising about January, but we knew the two special days would follow very soon after each other.
And why were you surprised about January?
No, because normally you see the dip coming a couple of weeks before the Chinese New Year, but because we had it quite busy in January, and we expected actually, if it's so busy in January, then the dip in the schedule in February will be lesser. So actually, we were looking forward for a good February. And
You had the same...
Same feeling, yeah.
Yeah.
We had the same ideas. What you also see is that what now is happening is that customers are looking at other sourcing. So they're looking at other regions if they can source, even intra-European sourcing instead of China, or also other countries like Vietnam and Korea. So if they're clever in their multiple sourcing, they can do it, yeah.
Do you have a lot of customers moving products to China rather than importing products from China?
We have eastbound, yes, and it's actually it contains 2 types or 3 types. You have pharmaceutical thing. You have because we are connected also with the optical fiber industry. So things which needed to produce optical products in China. You see that there is a lot of eastbound cancelled at this moment. And you have consumer goods which are not sent at this moment because there are no buyers.
You're not consuming,
No.
yeah. Okay.
Correct.
And what about the export? How large is your customer base in Wuhan?
In Wuhan, we predominantly have the manufacturing industry for the car automotive sector and the industrial. And most of these are spare parts, so they are very important for their, let's say, logistics centers here and production centers in Europe. The moment they cannot produce these parts, which is a big flow into, for example, Germany and Netherlands, we see customers looking for other sourcing. So it's very important for them to keep the production running in Europe. So that's why they're looking at other sourcing regions and countries.
Right.
And then we see a split of using other rail connections, which we have. We have 17 routes into Europe. So they're using southern Chinese or even Korea or Vietnam as a rail route. Yeah.
And it started in Wuhan, but it's not only Wuhan anymore.
No.
Which other areas are infected?
At this moment, second is not a worse date again, 02/02/2020, when everybody should start with working. You see that Wenzhou is locked up, and also Zhejiang province, so that's Ningbo and Hangzhou are very cautious at this moment, also putting into more stricter terms to their people to stay home. So it's Wuhan and Wenzhou are quite connected with each other. 180,000 Wenzhou people who are working in Wuhan. There's a lot of traffic up and down, also investments.
Yeah.
So that's also the reason why in Wenzhou the highest amount of infected people after Wuhan. And that's quite. It shows that it's not under control actually. That's still And yeah, everybody knows Zhejiang is a very even more important province for the Chinese GDP than
Correct.
Hubei. So it will be as it affects. People will be more afraid to go out. Yeah.
And if we look at logistics only, so not at the outbreak of the virus, are the other provinces running their logistics operations, or is it the same everywhere?
If you stopped your factories for a while, you don't have any supply to your terminals.
No.
So Igor already said carriers already taking out ships out of schedule to create some scarce resource issues. And so it affects every modality. Air freight, there are no Western airliners which are flying to there.
Yeah.
So
Because it starts with the factories.
it starts
Yeah.
with the factories, with the supply chain. We have such a complicated supply chain after we started to outsource everything out of Europe to China.
Yeah.
We created a very complicated supply chain issues, which is perfect when it works well. But when you get a hiccup, you see what is happening then.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for the companies that do multi-sourcing, for them it's obvious that they can source from other parts. But if you're a medium or small company, it's very hard to change your supply chain in a few weeks. So also what you see is that sea freight companies are pulling out a lot of sailings already. 1.3 million tows in the coming period is a lot. It's sort of like 58 sailings in the coming period, where last year it was 25. So that's already a signal that says, sea freight is also a challenge. It's going to be a challenge according to what the production sites are producing.
Yeah. And I also heard that staff is not allowed to go on the ship either, because there might be an outbreak on a ship, and
Exactly.
that is...
That's not allowed.
And what about airplanes? Because I understood that the belly capacity of the passenger flights is not there, but
No.
how big is that impact?
That's a huge impact if the normal airlines are not flying belly freight. So you need to go on cargo, which increases the rate. You're also depending 100% on cargo flights, and some of these are pulled out as well. So what we see is the demand will be lower and the price will go up. And then we're back to whatever mortality is open, and that will be sort of the rail will be the one that's now still open and moving, so to say. So a lot will come to us from a sea and air perspective. That's what we think and guess.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to have a look at the local situation. We're coming back to you soon, but we're going to have a Skype call with Jackie Yan. And Jackie Yan is working for China Trans International Limited. We're going to have a wait until he comes, and there he is. Hello, Jackie.
Hello, Mike.
Can we hear you clearly?
Yes,
You can hear us, but can we hear
yes.
you?
Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I hope
Okay.
everybody can hear you. And soon we will see you as well. Yes, there you are. Thank you very much for joining us. You're based in Chengdu, isn't that?
Yes.
Okay, and how is the situation in Chengdu at the moment?
Chengdu is also least impacted by this virus outbreak. So in the total number of people who is also affected this disease is about 77 so far up to today. So it's still okay, but everybody is also try to remain at home, of course, to stay away from the disease.
Yeah. And what about yourself? Are you staying at home as well?
Yeah, I stay at home for almost like 2 weeks. Just try to remain at home. Except any activities outside of home. Yeah.
Okay. And are you trying to work a little from home? Is that possible at all?
Yeah, we started working from home as of yesterday already, because as according to the China State Council, so still that parts of the province need to start working as of February the 3rd. That was yesterday. So we start from working from home yesterday. The whole company in Chengdu, the whole team.
Okay. So you're actually working. Um, what does your company do? Let's start with that, so we can better understand what you do.
Okay. So my company is China Trans International. We are a big neutral ocean freight and rail freight consolidator in China. We have a team of about 1,200 staff, about 21 offices in different cities of China.
So you're trying to consolidate cargo going through Chengdu to Europe.
Not only from Chengdu, but from all the rail terminals in China to and from China to Europe and from Europe. We also have eastbound cargo as well. Yeah.
Okay. And what is possible at the moment?
The I'm keeping how say in between that I'm keeping updating the train schedules on the LinkedIn and other websites, to keep people informed. This is very important. So we are preparing for the how say shipping of the cargo, even though that most of the factories are still closed, but we need to we need to get inquiry answered. So and also to coordinate on different resources to make sure that we are ready for the shipping once people resume work on February the 10th in the eastern part of China, like Zhejiang province or
So on the
Shanghai area.
February the 10th, people will resume working in the east.
Yes, in the east and in the south as well.
Okay, all the provinces will do that.
Except Hubei province.
Right, yeah, okay. And resuming to work, does that mean they go to office and drive the trucks, or does that mean they try to do what you do at the moment?
In the office means that the actually go to the office physically, so start working as usual. Yeah.
Right. So because one of the problems I heard is that there's a lack of truck drivers, so the cargo cannot be picked up or delivered to the trains. How does that look now? Are there any truck drivers available, and are there any trucks on the road?
There are already some truck drivers on the road already, but of course very limited resources, and the issue is that for the truck drivers outside of Shanghai, for example, so what I'm being in touch with the truck companies in Shanghai, for example, for the truck drivers who are outside of Shanghai or living outside of Shanghai wants to return to work in Shanghai, they have to be kind of isolated for another 14 days to make sure that they are not affected by the disease. So
Yeah.
that it makes that the shortage of truck drivers make the situation even worse, of course.
Yeah. So that means that from now on, if they started working yesterday, they would at least not be able to work for another 15 days. Correct? Or is
Yeah,
that even too
only
optimistic?
yes for the drivers that outside of Shanghai, for example. Yeah.
Right. And there's also a lot of people still stuck in the places they went to for the holidays.
Yes, that's true.
Are people able to move back to their hometowns?
Yes, they can, of course, only except Hubei province. For the rest of China, all the public transportation works very well, perfectly. They can move freely.
And are they doing that, or are they still afraid to move out?
I think people will already start moving these days because if, for example, if say for people who are working in Shanghai, they are right now spending their holidays at Chengdu. They have to be come to office on February the 10th. And even that, so they have to go to the Shanghai earlier than February 10th. Yeah.
Okay. So there are some light points in the story. You posted a train schedule on LinkedIn the other day, and we have that train schedule. I just want to have a quick look at it. Yes, this is the one. Is that still up to date?
Yes, yeah, I'm going to send out. I'm going to update it after the webinar for today's information because things have been keeping changing. That's why
Right.
that is also could be confusing information.
Okay.
So that's the update for yesterday, but we still have some small updates for today.
Okay, so maybe we can share that train schedule after you posted it in on RailFreight as well, so people get a little bit of an idea. What is the first train that looks likely to depart?
The first trains from Hefei is February the 12th and 13th from Hefei to Hamburg and to Neuss in Germany. And then after that is say Xiamen. The first train is February the 15th, say to Duisburg and Hamburg. And then also we have the train from Xi'an to Duisburg and Hamburg as well.
Okay, and are those trains fully booked?
Yes, it's almost fully booked, and
Right.
we can see that there are some backlogs from before Chinese New Year as well.
Yeah. And which other provinces are following up with train movement?
That's from Chengdu.
From China. Okay. All right. Well, it's very helpful that you update us with the train schedule. How do you get your information? Can we reach that same source, or we're just going to have to follow you, all of us, on LinkedIn?
To be honest, we spend quite a lot of efforts to connect all this information because there's no official way to publish all this from any of these platforms. We've been in touch with each of them every day to connect this updated information. There's no centralized information source.
Okay. So it's very helpful that you're doing this. Thank you very much. I'm going to see if there are any questions. I need to... Okay, I don't get that. Okay, we do have a lot of questions. Well, this is the question I think a lot of people have asked. Will China Europe Rail have the capacity to handle the demand that comes in from air and ocean? Do you think there is enough capacity to handle all the cargo coming from air and ocean?
I'm afraid not, because the capacity for the freight train is also quite limited, and for the information for the booking that we received so far, the trains for the second part of the February is almost fully booked, and we are trying to apply with the China Railway, the head office in Beijing, try to increase some block trains, but so far it's not approved yet. We are still trying to get more capacity but so far it's not enough.
No. Okay, that's clear. I have heard, this is a question from Michael Azikov. I have heard from Chinese colleagues that in some provinces like Jiangsu, many workers started working from the 3rd of February. Manufacturers are started as well. Shipping is going on, no problem. Is this correct?
From which province? Jiangsu?
Jiangsu. Jiangsu.
No, that's incorrect. The Jiangsu province has also extended the holiday until February the 10th.
Okay. So unfortunately, there is a problem.
Yes.
This is a question from Thomas Nguyen Xian. I hope I pronounced that right. there should be capacity provided for urgent containers via railway services. I suppose for regular shipment via railway and air, this should be enough. Ocean volume is ocean volumes are too big, and only some urgent ones can be arranged. I think what he's trying to say is that will there be a priority for urgent shipments, and how would you define urgent shipments? Would be my follow-up question. How do you think about that?
I think for the I'll say for the rail freight is same as ocean freight and the air freight. It's kind of like a market driven, of course, activity. We define the urgency of the shipment is also depends on, I'll say, the supply and demand, of course, of the space. So end of the day, it will be when the space is limited, and how say people will prioritize those cargo who can be, how say, paid higher rates.
Okay. I think we are going to go to our next caller, but there are some other questions, and maybe later on there will be more questions for you, Jackie. And I want to ask if we can send you those questions later on by email and have them answered.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer the questions.
Okay.
Offline.
Well, thank you very much for joining in, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you for your invitation.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So that was Jackie with some latest updates, which it looks like we all have some different information, and I think from China it's maybe easier to get the latest. There's a lot of things we discussed, which I know you also have some things to say about. We'll do that. We'll go to Marco Reichel first. I'll call him up. Marco Reichel is based in Shanghai. And there he is. Hello, Marco.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. How are you?
Great. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
How is the situation in Shanghai?
Well, I would say same as Jackie already announced as well. There is not too many people on the streets. It's pretty empty here. Truck drivers are also not seen on the streets here. Everyone stays at home as much as he can. It's not that worse that we have to stay home, so we can go outside, have a walk, have a short walk, but it's not recommended from the government at the moment.
No, because Jackie said there were some people who are encouraged to work again, actually since yesterday. But you also explained that there is not a lot of willingness to do so. Can you describe how this is among the Chinese population? Are they willing to go back to work?
Yeah, so they try to stay as much inside. They don't want to go outside at this moment. So as the Chinese New Year has been prolonged until the 9th of February, and official first working day is on the 10th, therefore, many people stay inside. Many people have even extended their holidays outside of China. So there is definitely a lot of people still traveling around and traveling in Asia especially.
Yeah. And you work for Crane Worldwide Logistics. What does your company do?
Yes, so I'm working for Crane Worldwide Logistics. We are the freight forwarder here at the whole table. We are working with Jackie, for example, to get our cargo moving with rail carriers or rail providers. We are the last link to the clients here directly. That's what we currently, majority doing here.
So you also have a little bit of a view on the sea shippers.
Yes. So what we provide is full freight forwarding services. So air freight, ocean freight, as well as rail freight. For example, here the impact currently is seen also in warehousing as warehouses are trying to not work or trying to not deploy too many people to the warehouse. As we have heard as well, there is some capacity on the trucks still available. There are also some special permissions for truck drivers. They have to file this with the government in order to go back to work earlier than the 9th of February. So this is the latest information for us at this moment. We have certain cargo.
What kind of permit is that?
Well, it is a permit. We need to issue here by the health quarantine office, as well as to the government directly. So the truck driver needs to visit the officials there and needs to bring in a permit why the cargo has to be moved before the end of the Chinese New Year, the extended Chinese New Year. And this is the situation as of now. We haven't got the confirmation yet, though. So we have pulled in many requests yesterday with the government to get some truck drivers on the road, but it hasn't been confirmed yet, and it may take even 3 days to get a confirmation based on this.
And do they need to be checked by health and then they're free to go?
It is kind of like with a health check combined. Yes, that is true. I think it is more about the urgency of the cargo. So how the government sees that the cargo needs to be urgently pulled out, especially for expiration goods. So food items and all this, which is currently on the port or arriving very soon.
Okay. So which big factories are located in your area?
Well, here in Shanghai, or the east of China, including the Jiangsu province, Zhejiang, which connected to Hangzhou, Taicang, Suzhou, those are very big economic areas where a lot of European clients are located, a lot of Europeans setting up the factories here. I would say a majority of the economy is either here or in south of China at this moment, where everyone is focusing on to get the cargo moving. For us here, it's definitely automotive. We do have big factories of Bosch or Volkswagen, which are located nearby. What we also hear is that there is some people working in these factories, but as long as not enough to really move out cargo at this point.
And what would be the impact on the economy? I know that the forecasts are not really there yet, and it's hard to predict. But can you already tell some things happening and some changes in price, for example?
What we see, and what is definitely also interesting to see for the economy after the 9th will be the healthcare business. As at this moment, we are not very sure how many health products are coming out of Wuhan region, but there is definitely a big portion of healthcare companies located in this area. We can also see the stock exchange in Shanghai or the stock exchange in Hong Kong is already dipping down. We see economics definitely going down for at least until end of February, March, which is expected at this point. But it's all really just out of the blue, so no one really knows what is going to be happening after the 9th or after the 10th of February.
Yeah. Do you also see local price changes?
No, we don't see as much here in Shanghai. I think the supply of food items and all of this is quite regulated. So we don't have a big change in prices here directly. Definitely logistics will be of impact to price changes as we talked, and Jackie also said truck drivers. We do have limited truck driver capacities at this moment. The biggest problem we may also face after the 9th or the 10th of February that most of the truck drivers cannot return to their workplaces, which means we still have a limited capacity right after also.
Right. So it's not only about Wuhan, it's actually everywhere in China.
Yes, it is because mainly because of the travel restrictions China gave out. Problem what we have as of today, I just read an article, 65% of all flights in Shanghai have been cancelled. So I think people really struggle by end of this week to get home. Also with traveling within Asia, we have talked about that before, that a lot of European carriers, airlines have reduced flights or even completely cancelled all the flights. I believe a lot of the workforce in China is still stranded somewhere outside.
Yeah. Which modality do you think is most affected? Sea, ocean, or rail? There's different opinions about that.
Yes, it is very different at this moment. I mean, we see that the belly freight is out of the market for the Chinese market, at least for international or long-haul flights at this moment. Cargo is still allowed to go out. The air freight might be the most impacted at this time, as the ports are still, or seaports are still open. and they can be loaded. We don't know how the situation will be, but this all depends on the trucking companies. How fast can they deploy their workers back, and how fast can we pick up the cargo? I believe there is a big fight later on this week, next week, where we all fight about the truck drivers to get cargo moving.
So it all relies on the truck drivers now.
Unfortunately, yeah, they are the first link to every terminal, to every airport, to every rail terminal, and this is the difficulty we have to play with.
And the distribution centers, are those
DCs, as far as I know, still closed. Also, what we can see when we look and we order e-commerce here in China based on Taobao, which is one of the biggest e-commerce companies or e-commerce platforms here in China, quite similar to Amazon. We do not receive any packages. There is still some orders which are just on pending, just until the 10th or the 9th of February can be delivered or can be released. And this is the information we have as of now. We don't know if the holidays will be even get more extended based on the situation.
Okay. Are there any, to your knowledge, any extra checkpoints at the border for trains or trucks?
Well, they do health checks for staff, and they do health checks for passenger flights coming in. They do also health checks at terminals, as far as I know. But there is not really a lot of cargo moving because of the Chinese New Year. That's why we don't see that there is a huge impact. The only thing what they announced as well is that live animals cannot be moved within the next time, which is also quite clear, as no one knows if the virus also spreads on animals.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's actually a question about that, about agricultural produce. Is that a big problem for the logistics industry, that live animals cannot be moved, or is that only a small portion of the
I would
supply
say
chain?
the live animals moving out of China is a very small portion. Agriculture products, however, is quite a big market here. Companies like Cargill, working with huge factories here in China, they might be impacted based on this. But as of now, we do not have any information that virus even survives on agriculture products. Of course, the cargo might be impacted because once everything gets sorted out, most ocean carriers do not like to fill up their vessels with heavyweight cargo, which is most likely agriculture cargo. So we do see definitely some issues might happening in the supply chain and transportation of this cargo, as carriers also try to use their own resource or use different cargo types that they can fulfill the ships.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to ask people to send in questions also during the webinar. If they think of something later on, we can send it to you. Is that okay?
Yes, for sure. Of course.
Okay. Then we'll be in touch. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And good luck there.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, back to the gentleman on the table. Did you hear anything new?
No, not really. It's a lot of uncertainties, especially for the truck drivers, which we said.
Yeah.
So you can have the sail and the rail terminals working, but in fact, if you don't get your cargo with the truckers to the right terminal platform, it's an issue.
Yeah. Now we're going to look a little bit ahead, because we don't know when everything is going to be up and running. It could be the end of February, it could be the end of March. How are you preparing for the operations running?
Everything will go about capacity. If you have the capacity, you can serve your client. If you do not have it, you need to disappoint them.
Yeah.
And I think each forwarder will have that same problem. And I think the ones who are willing to take the most risk at this moment by blocking capacity, and to be honest, I think the Chinese side is willing to have take more risk than the European side, also because they know they will be covered by government if they fell down or tend to go to bankruptcy. So Yeah, you need to use your relations very well to get what you need for your customers, and that will be not only with rail but also with air and also with sea freight.
Yeah.
Relations will be everything next period.
So it's not going to be a fair competition.
To be honest, I think as soon as you can, or if it's safe to travel, it's smart to travel to China to search and find your relations in the business you are busy with. Yeah.
And probably you see the same situation when you're in a peak period. You see the big shippers have, the preference over the smaller shipments. So if you're a mid-sized small shipper, you have an issue that your cargo will be left as a backlog in the terminals, which you don't want, of course. But we try to seek the best solution out of the capacity we have. But we do see that big shippers will get preference over smaller shippers.
But would you also, because is it also up to you to select your customers, or do you have a solid customer base and you will serve them first?
I think it's smart to. It's difficult when you are competitors with each other, but in China they already understand we need to have a consolidator to get a bigger volume, and because we have a bigger guaranteed volume together, we have a bigger chance to get some volume. I think that game will be played next weeks. Who is willing to give something to the other, but in the end you also need to give something back. And the problem with Chinese is you never know when they ask you to give something back. So it's very difficult to make an economical decision about it. Do I am willing to go with them like that, and that's what we need to find out next terms. Yeah.
But are there any smart solutions that are available, or do you have to change your way of working?
Yeah, I think you have to search for the solutions which are in the market. But it's also a question to the shippers: are they willing to pay more distance trucking to other terminals to come into Europe? Are they willing to overcome certain supply chain standards to go, out of the box and go with a different solution into Europe? And that's a question if shippers are eager to pay this for their loads. And the bigger shippers will do that, of course, the bigger companies.
Now, there's also a lot of cargo coming from sea freight, you expect. And how much is that, do you think?
Well, what we've just read in the news yesterday was 1.3 million tows. That's about 58 sailings will go out of the sea freight sailings. That's double what we've seen last year. So that means these containers have to move anyway. And if rail is open, then it's really asking the shippers to be very quick on booking the train, which are still then empty as a space for the wagons. But yeah, if you're late in the game, then it's an issue.
But is air freight another option then?
Yeah, but probably there as well as in the peak season, you will pay a lot of chunk of money to get your the goods in a safe time into Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, but train is also expected to rise in costs.
I think the platforms will not rise there.
No.
The tariffs, because they are based on subsidies, based on things which are at least 3 months terms. If you're lucky, 6 months. But that will, as expected, maybe they even get more subsidies to get things running. And as I know also from my Chinese people working in China Southern, also the air freight of Chinese Southern gets subsidized at the moment to get things running. So if you have things which they need at this moment, even if you earn money on it, they are willing to ship it for free. If you so that's happening, but it's all based on information you get from Chinese networks, and so the parties in between, the first line, second line, third line forwarders, they will have a demand issue. If the demand is high, they will ask a high price, and if the demand is low, they will accept they make a small loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, for some companies, it's a moment to earn money extra on top of in the normal situation.
Yeah. And do you think we will also see that on the consumer market? Will the product prices rise?
It depends. It might be on the long term. Depends on how long this will take from the coronavirus perspective. But if supply chain is impacted more enough in the coming 3 months, I think it will in the end come into the consumer prices.
So 3 months it would take for the market.
if you look to the next Christmas time, so a lot of companies buying LED lights at this moment. The factories are not producing, so they get back on a schedule. It's very difficult to follow up and to come back on schedule. So then transit times get an issue.
Yeah.
And when transit times get an issue, you pay a higher price for your transport.
Yeah.
And that decision depends if a price, if the product owner takes a lesser margin or says no, it's a general problem. I will put it put it forward to the consumer.
Yeah. Now, the new Silk Road, as if we make it a little bit wider, the context was doing good, and we saw positive numbers, we saw big growth, and we said even when the subsidies are going down, the new Silk Road will continue and the volumes will continue to rise. Does this impact this whole larger story, or do you think it is just a temporary thing and will not be felt in the long term?
For what I know from my relations in China, this is only temporary for the period of the coronavirus. I don't think on the long term you will change whatever is set as the One Belt One Road initiative. I think that the governments will still subsidize lesser to the rail freight, but it's also, I think rail freight has become more important for the Chinese government to actually expedite the One Belt One Road initiative. So I don't think that's going to change. It's more how far are we going to extend the capacity? Are we double stacking containers to come into Europe? These sort of things. So what are the investments doing on the long run? But I think this is a exceptional case situation.
Yeah.
It does do something with the pride of the Chinese, because they are again a problem which has infectious in the world after SARS, and they were building up a nation, and this has something to this has some bad influence also by themselves. But at the end, in the long run, also in the strategy they have to replace industries from the East Coast to Central and to Western China, they need to have a land connection. Otherwise, they cannot supply the market and the change into Europe. And it's a much bigger geopolitical program also, and they will not stop that because of 1 month coronavirus.
Well, 1 month could be 3 months.
Yeah, but then even then, it will be a hiccup for maybe 2, 3, 4 years, but they think 30 years, 40 years,
Exactly.
50 years. So
long-term strategy.
Long-term strategy.
But about that reputation thing, do you think it could not lead to a loss of trust from the market?
I would expect that some of the companies, when they source just out of that region or out of China, and they think, well, now it's quite dangerous to source only out of China, they would like to invest in other sourcing possibilities. You've seen companies, because of the tariffs, we've seen moving into Vietnam and Malaysia just because of the tariffs. And I would say if you have the same situation again next year, companies would become clever and move their sourcing to other regions. Yes, for sure.
And are the possibilities looking good from Korea, Japan, and those countries?
I mean, Vietnam is now also connected to rail. Malaysia and Singapore are the next. India is also now questioned with Pakistan and India connecting by rail. So yes, for the future, I think these countries will connect anyhow. So building up a supply chain out of the factories in Vietnam is already there. I mean, we can go by rail into Europe right now. It's a bit longer than Western China or Eastern China, but at least the supply chain is there. So for the future is covered.
And the Chinese themselves also do it.
Exactly.
So they're also investing a lot in Southeast Asian countries. Also move industries which are too expensive. The labor is too expensive to produce in China because it's not a low labor. Everybody thinks cheap China, but not anymore. An IT specialist earn more than in Europe. You will be surprised what people in Tencent earn. So that's also already a process which is already happening last 5 years. You see more and more robotica coming into the Chinese industry. So it could not be on a worse moment and a worse place in China. In a central place on a Weixin board.
Exactly.
That's how Wuhan do their city marketing. But this is really.
It is centrally located, but I also saw some numbers. It only represents 4.9% of all the export.
No, GDP.
GDP.
So it's quite yeah.
But that's not a lot.
It's not a lot, but if you look to the 2025 industries, which are Wuhan is a very important hub. It is also for the future has a very big influence on things.
Okay.
There are 1.4 million students, 82 universities.
Yeah.
All the high speed trains pass by.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has a big influence. It's if you see the investments in infrastructure they made in China, and the crossings of highways and railways, then Hubei is one of the highest investment areas at this moment.
Yeah.
Till last year, they still had a double-digit growth in Wuhan.
And you think that will change?
This will be have a big effect on the GDP and the growth in at least this year. Yeah.
Before we go to some last questions, I would like to ask you, what would you advise the customer at this point, both of you?
Yeah, I think if they detect any issues on air or sea freight, I think it's very clever for them to seek, well, at least our support as well, to move it as quickly as possible on rail, because we also see that, as Jackie said, the rail is already booked for February, so March and April will probably be booked in the coming weeks. So when you have an issue with capacity, maybe move quicker into rail, if that's possible, of course, and of course look for other sourcing, if possible, in other regions to serve your market in Europe. The other way around, eastbound, I think we have to still detect what's going on when we arrive in Chengdu and Chongqing to see what's happening on the Chinese side for delivery. But that's all related to government decisions and truckers and everything available. But we'll keep them informed at all times. Yeah.
Okay. And you?
Yeah, well, as already said earlier, we think that the smaller shippers should be smart and take some entrepreneurial risks if they really have a necessity to ship their products. And what we already see is that the bigger customers already ask for capacity and ask us to guarantee and go to the platforms to get shipments done. And it's not about a small amount of containers they want, because they want to deliver as scheduled, and they want to run into and bring back the things they could not deliver, especially in the eastbound, and that's what we see. So, if we can serve them, I really don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, audience, any questions for these gentlemen? I see that a lot of people are willing to help out. That is good. A lot of people are offering their help. They have some latest updates. They have latest train schedules. And I am not able to read them all because they're all different. Well, there is some mention of the medical aid to China. I think you're also doing that. Maybe you can refer to that. How does that work at the moment?
I get a lot of questions, but there is a lot of requests on medical aid.
Yeah.
And also a big problem is that in Hubei is a big important base of pharmaceutical production. So that's also what Jackie meant. And that factory is also not producing at this moment. But there is a shortage in Hubei. There is a shortage of the simple medical, also for the medical staff, the mouth caps, the facial masks, the clean, the medical wear, what they wear, and it's. That there is a big shortage, because you can not keep on using your mask or keep on using your.
And you're one of the operators offering.
Yes, we have, but again, you can put the products and send them to Xi'an, and we had the line to Xianyang, but that one is not operating. So again, you need to find a licensed trucker which is willing to drive it into the zero area.
So even the medical aid is not.
No, that's the biggest. If you look to the discussions within China, because the social media, they keep it quite open. Also, the people can. Yeah, there's an open discussion about how government should react on such things. It's quite amazing that that people can just spread their opinion about it, especially within Roubaix. And the Red Cross is also not working well. So even if you donate, it's not does not mean that it will be very quickly to the source.
And what do you mean not working well? You mean that it's not reaching the.
That's not reaching the people who need it. Yeah.
And why is that? Because of the fear?
The government structures.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is very important at the moment. How do we get medical aid there?
Yeah.
Another topic to be discussed. Well, we can discuss this, I think, almost every week, because you see a lot of information is changing on a daily basis. So we'll try to keep everybody up to date. I'm sure you are keeping people up to date. We will try to do the same on RailFreight. If you have any information, you or any of the listeners, you can always send it to us, and we'll try to put everything together. And there is a next webinar. I'm not sure if it's going to be about this topic, but the 6th of March, we're going to have another webinar, and we're going to be in Poznan from 11, 12, and 13th of May to discuss RailFreight in Poland. So perhaps this topic will come back there as well. I would like to thank you, and of course our Chinese guests, and the audience for participating, and all the useful tips and advices. You can read the comments on the site for all those advices, and we'll do a report on railfreight.com. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.